Good Monday morning. On my way to the gym and then on to work. So I thought I'd cut this, well, I'm not going to cut it short, but I am going to get straight to it. So today I thought I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Kotlin versus Swift. And to give you a little bit of background on Kotlin and Swift. So Swift is the new language. It used to be Objective-C, that was the language you used in order to do iOS development. And Kotlin is a new flavor of Java. Well, as if you're a Java developer, you may or may not know that in the past you have things such as Groovy and you have Scala and things of that nature that it's not Java, which is the original language, but it is built on top of the JVM, which is the machine that runs the Java code. So Kotlin is another language that runs on the same technology, right? And so a comparison between these two is, to me, a little bit interesting to have, because I've been working in both languages. More in Swift than in Kotlin, but I have a decent understanding of Kotlin. And the reason why I have a decent understanding of Kotlin is because it's so close to Swift. And you may think this is silly, but I'm actually very excited about these two languages. So when you've done both Android and iOS development, you quickly well, at least I did. I started doing Android development in the beginning of my career and in school and so forth. And although, mobile development is really fascinating. I actually absolutely love mobile development. It's very easy to get started. It's a very nice ecosystem. It's very beginner friendly. I would even say that if you are interested in mobile development and you want to go and be a programmer, it's a great way to get started, because it kind of... You're provided this very nice little box or sandbox, basically, where you're very limited in terms of, you can't really fuck things up. Okay, you can fuck things up. If you really want to fuck things up, you can. But for the most part, it's actually very, in my opinion, approachable to start with. If we have a spectrum where the absolute left extreme is C, where you have where things are extremely difficult, and the very on the other side of the spectrum you have things such as, I don't know, WordPress or things like that. When it comes in terms of creating your own stuff, the mobile development is kind of leaning towards WordPress. There's still coding involved and you still have to do a lot of stuff, but you're not completely free to do anything you want. So it's a great way to start. So the comparison between the two comes from that when I started doing mobile development for Android, it was still a few years ago, five-ish years ago, and the Android Studio and that back in those days, I speak like I'm a million years old, but back in those days you didn't have access to Android didn't have a decent simulator. You used everything Genymotion is a great product for simulating Android development without having a device and so forth. And as I said, Android Studio wasn't really around. It was just getting popular. We didn't even have Gradle, so it wasn't all that great. And when it comes to Java and so forth, it was basically standard Java. And so then a few years back I got into iOS development, and I got in roughly where Swift 2, I think, had just been fairly recently been released. And basically I started doing that, and I fell absolutely in love with Swift. The named parameters is one of my absolute favorite things, and of course closures is a great thing. And having that amazing hybrid between functional stuff, where you can declare basically your function at the top level scope, and then still have the objective oriented stuff, the OOP stuff if you need it, I was absolutely amazed at. I'm still kind of hyping that language. Not in the, it's not my favorite language of all time, but it is my favorite language for things that feel like for corporate stuff. It's in my opinion, if you had a fight today, if we reset the clock today, and there was a fight between, let's say, you know, C# and Java and Swift, and we just, this is a really big fantasy, but let's say for the sake of argument that the fight was just at the language level, then I think that Swift would win it, because a lot of the stuff that is really great with Java and C#, Swift has all of that and more. The only thing that I really lack in Swift that I think is really bad is actually Xcode. Xcode is a shitty IDE, I'm sorry. Like in comparison to, in comparison to Eclipse, which is, you know, if you don't know, that is like the grandfather of Java developers' development experience. So I think that that's like the one side on it, and then you have now Kotlin, which is actually something I'm actually even more excited about Kotlin than I am about Swift. And it's almost a little bit unfair, because the reason why I'm so excited about Kotlin is that it's a Java-based language that is so similar to Swift that they could have been the same, almost could have been the same language. Now, some of you hipsters or like evangelists may argue with me on this, but the similarities are so massive, like so great, that it feels almost like working in the same language. To me, it's like working in C# versus Java. It's so similar that you pick it up very quickly. And that makes me very excited when Google goes around and kind of just says that, hey, Kotlin is now going to be a first-class citizen in the Android environment. So now we have access to all of these nice things, such as closures and so forth, and name parameters. Name parameters is amazing, and optionals as well. Optionals, oh, I love optionals. Optionals are amazing. In Android development, it kind of gets me excited to, like, I want to do more Android development again. It was a while since I did it, and now I want to do it again. You know, I get like all excited again, and you know, I don't know why, I just do. And so when you compare these two, if we just consider the language level, I think they're almost interchangeable. If you know Kotlin, you can almost jump in and learn Swift immediately, and vice versa. It's very easy to pick up, because that's how similar these languages are. If you talk about development experience, I would have to say that Kotlin wins it, or Android wins it. And mostly it does so because, in my opinion, because Android Studio is a much nicer development experience than Xcode. Like, it's much, in my opinion, it's a much better IDE. It had a little bit of help since it's based on Eclipse, so you know, a little bit of help. And yeah, like there are of course things that aren't so nice with the, you know, the Android development experience. I mean, if it's much easier, in my opinion, to keep things consistent in iOS, because, you know, Apple is, you know, they own all of their devices, and the range of devices that they have to support is much more narrow than you have to do in Android, which means that there aren't as many screens to consider, there aren't as many devices to consider, and so forth. It's not a massive problem, but it is still a problem. So for fairness sake, we'll just compare the language level, and if it's just a language level decision, Kotlin versus Swift, the only reason I would argue for Kotlin over Swift is because it runs on the JVM. That's the only reason. It's because Apple's technology is specific to Apple's hardware. They're working on it, but it is still specific to their hardware. It's not as flexible as anything that runs on Java or the JVM. So Kotlin, I would even go as far as to say that I think Kotlin would be a pretty strong choice for server-side stuff as well. I mean, not just mobile development. I know it's getting popular because of mobile, but hey, I would actually consider it a strong choice for, you know, just regular server-side programming, if you will. So that's my opinion. I would say that it's a close call between Swift and Kotlin. Kotlin just barely wins it because of a few things, but at the language level, they're, in my opinion, a tie.